What is the strongest proof for God's existence? That's the topic of today's conversation. Let's get into it. It's day 16 of the Hopeful Skeptic Coffee Chat, so I invite you to get your favorite beverage, mine's coffee, sit back and think about today's question. I know what today's question is because it's from one of you. It's from Pacific Waves, which, first, that's a pretty sweet name, and thank you for asking this question. It is, what do you think is the strongest proof for God? And because we're going to talk about terms, I'm going to replace that word proof with evidence. So what do I think is the strongest evidence for God's existence? Let me start out by saying, I think whether you are a theist or an atheist, we should all agree that the universe or cosmos has a cause. And I believe that that cause is timeless, spaceless, immaterial, and unchanged, and I think you should too. And if you don't agree with that, I think you're wrong. Let me explain why. You see, the most powerful argument for the existence of God, I believe, is the Kalam cosmological argument. And before you just click off this video because you think, oh, I've heard this before, I encourage you to wait until the end because I may have a little bit of a different take on it than most people, because I'm coming at it from somebody that isn't trying to prove that God exists. I'm just trying to honestly look at the evidence on both sides. So first, what is the Kalam cosmological argument? It's a variation of the cosmological argument that William Lane Craig came up with, and it states, whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. And I would argue that this argument is true. And I believe you should believe that regardless of if you think God exists or not. This is why. Starting with the first premise, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Now, on its face, hopefully that sounds very, very obvious. And I think it should, and I think it is. Things don't pop into being, period, that we experience. Now, recently, people have begun to discover quarks coming in and out of existence, or in and out of being, or moving between two places. And that has given rise to this idea, maybe the universe is like that. Maybe the universe has popped into being out of nothing. And so that first premise has come into a bit of controversy nowadays. And I don't think it should. Because there's a very big difference between quarks going from one place to another. And again, I think this goes without saying, I'm not a mathematician, I'm not a cosmologist, I'm not a physicist. But just think about this logically. Quarks coming in and out of being inside of space at a specific point in time, going through a field of energy that is our universe, and which is a piece of matter going from one place to another, is very different. Those four things make it very different than space, time, material, and energy coming into being out of nothing. Those are categorically different things. One is all of those things coming into being out of philosophical nothingness. The other is within the universe, material moving from one place to another in a way that is extremely hard to fathom. And granted, I'm not saying I understand how that happens, but let's just be honest that those are very different things. Now, there's more to talk about on that, and I'm eventually going to make a longer video on this, but these are just my off-the-cuff thoughts. Premise 2, the universe began to exist. Now, if you've just written that off because of the Big Bang, because we all know 13.4 billion years ago the universe, started, quote, let's rethink that a little bit. Because yes, because of huge discoveries like redshift or the expansion of the universe, we know that if you rewind the clock, eventually it goes back to a singularity. However, there's two large theories right now that would cause that idea to come into question. Of one, Stephen Hawking's idea that the universe created itself. That if something like gravity existed, the universe was bound to create itself. And two, much more popularly, I believe, is the multiverse. And this idea states that there's not just one observable universe, or the universe that we're in, but there's possibly an infinite amount of universes. And this is an easy way to get around arguments like the teleological argument, which is one of the reasons why I would put that as the second best argument, although on a given day, maybe I would disagree with myself and say it's first. And not to get too sidetracked, but if we think about the origin of the universe, it started based on one of three things. One, it's outside of itself. Two, it's caused by itself. Or three, it's caused by nothing. And so for me, I think the two obvious candidates really should be those first two. I just am not at a place in life where I think we should be entertaining the idea that universes pop into being out of nothing. And again, I'm saying nothing not as like a soup of other universes, and this is just one observable universe that pops up out of the multiverse. I'm actually not opposed to that idea, but that's very different again than the true meaning of nothing. And that's what we would have to say caused the universe, or the universe came out of nothing, if we entertain that third idea. And so a second ago I said, if you believe the universe came into being because you have knowledge of the Big Bang, you should second guess that. And the reason I say that is because the biggest reason you should believe in the beginning of the universe, I believe, isn't because of evidence that this universe began. I believe it's because of philosophical arguments. And again, if you're someone that's scientifically minded and you think philosophy should be left to the Middle Ages, I would very much disagree with you that this is a way to logically make sense of the world. And I believe the biggest reason we should believe in the finitude of the past is because there is not a way I can see to believe in a set of infinite things. And if we believe in an infinite past, then we would have to believe that there is an actual set of real infinity, that the moments or causes that got us to this moment is literally infinite. And I know in the comments people are going to start saying, oh no, there's a huge, way to get around this. And so before you write that down, let me just give you my thoughts on that. There's a common belief that you can say, okay, there is a real infinity, because let's take a ruler, for instance. You have 12 inches, and I'm in America, so I'm using a ruler. Sorry if you're not in America. You can cut that in half. Now you have 6 inches. Then you can cut that in half. Now you have 3 inches. Then you can cut that in half. You have, 1.5 inches. And you can keep doing that forever. And so doesn't that prove, there's an infinite amount of intervals between any two spaces? Doesn't that prove there's an actual infinite everywhere? Or if you walk across the room from one wall to the other, didn't you just cross infinity because you crossed an infinite amount of dividable sections? Well, no. Because what we're saying is impossible is an actual complete set of infinity. That's very different than saying there is something that tends towards infinity. So let me give you an example. So a real set of infinity would be like saying you have an infinite set of coins. So you have the first coin, the second, the third, the fourth, to literally infinity, which I'm saying is impossible because just think about that. That's how do you get to infinity? But let's just say you have that, right? So now you have an infinite set of actual things, an actual beginning and end set of infinity. Okay. In that set, what if I took away every odd number? So you keep 2, 4, 6, 8. I get to take away 3, 5, 7, 9, and onward. So you started with infinity. Then I took infinity. And now you have infinity. I also have infinity. That doesn't make any sense. Or let's say differently, you have this infinite set of coins. And I took away every coin past 3. So now you started with infinity. Now I took away infinity, and now you have 3. You started with the exact same amount of coins in both scenarios. I took away the exact same amount of coins in both scenarios, but you were left with two completely different sets of coins. Philosophically, I don't think we can believe in or should believe that an actual set of infinite things exists. Now, why am I making a big deal of this? Okay, because I said a second ago, let's believe, for instance, in this multiverse theory, okay? Which, again, has no evidence, but it's super freaking cool. So let's just go down that rabbit hole, okay? The beginning of our universe, we'll call that, is 13.4 billion years ago. But that's just in a giant soup of, let's say, call it an infinite amount of other universes. So doesn't that get rid of God? Because now the cause of our universe isn't God, it's the multiverse. Can't we just move on if that were true? And I would say no, because then that multiverse also can't be infinite. It can't be literally infinite. So you're just, again, pushing the can down the road, which is an analogy you've heard a million times if you follow this kind of stuff. So whether or not you believe in a multiverse, it changes literally nothing. The universe or the cosmos began to exist. It can't be infinite in its past. So if things that come into being have a cause, and the universe or cosmos came into being, then the universe has a cause. And I don't think we need to be that afraid of that, no matter who you are. But it is interesting to think about what could cause a universe. And that's where things get exciting, because that cause would be the first cause. It's the very first thing that knocked over the domino. It can't have a cause prior to that. Why? Because just like we said, there has to be a first thing. There can't be an infinite. It has to be a beginning. And that beginning is what started time. So there is no logical way to say before this thing, because this thing is what caused time to exist. It's spaceless or immaterial because it created space. And it's changeless because before time existed, if it changed from one thing to another, then let's say it changed from A to B, well then before it was B, it was A. That created time. And if there's no time, there is no changing. So this thing that we're to say is a cause created all space, time, material, and energy. And this is where it really gets interesting for a theist. And this is why I think it's the best proof or evidence for the existence of God. Is the fifth thing that I think you can argue that this cause has to have. And that fifth thing is it being personal. And I'm not saying personal as in Jesus is my personal savior. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it made a decision. Why do I think it, being the cause, made a decision? Well, because if this cause had everything needed to create a universe, why did it only happen 13.4 billion years ago? Shouldn't it have happened infinitely long ago? And we would actually never have gotten to this moment, which is another conversation. But why did it only happen 13.4 billion years ago? And a theist would say it's because the cause is God. And God, sitting in this crazy to think about state of non-thinking, existent like granite, outside of time, space, material, because God is just a mind, place, chose to do something. And that choice created time. And that choice was to create a universe. And now that being created something or chose to create something, now there's time. He created a universe. So now there's time, space, boom, the Big Bang. And the story goes on to any classical, explanation of this argument. So to Pacific Wave's question, what do I think the best proof for God's existence? I think it's his argument, because I think it succeeds. I think it proves, if we can use that word, or has enough evidence that will convince an irrational man to believe in the cause of the universe. But shouldn't I all of a sudden now be a theist? Am I not still skeptical that God exists? I'm still skeptical even though I know this argument. And why is that? Well, the Big Bang says there is An original singularity is the word. And technically, that singularity could get us 4 of the 5 things that the cause of the universe arguably had. It's uncaused, timeless, changeless, and immaterial. Now, I think the theist wins this fight in this conversation because they have a really good reason to say that it chose to make a decision, or it chose to make a universe. But maybe it's just something that we haven't discovered yet. And if I'm going to say that I don't believe in God, then I would have to kind of have a reverse God of the gaps and say a naturalism of the gaps. We don't understand how a singularity could all of a sudden 13.4 billion years ago create the universe, or a multiverse sometime before then, but maybe we would find a naturalistic cause. And I think as a theist, you should press somebody that says that and say, that's the very argument of God of the gaps. You don't know something and you're just inserting future naturalistic evidence that doesn't actually exist right now. And I think they should. And I think the theist would win an argument if you're only talking about this argument. And because of that, I believe it's the best evidence for the existence of God. And I know this can sound crazy, but regardless of if you are a theist or an atheist, the universe was caused. And it was caused by something that really resembles what theists would call God, or at least people in my faith of heritage, the Christian faith, would call God. And because of that, that's one of the biggest reasons I was a Christian for so long, and am still considering being. Like, just take a second and let yourself think about that for a second. Like, touch something around you. Did you feel it? Was it physical? Did you move through space in order to touch it? Did you touch it at a certain point in time? Those things didn't always exist. How did they get here? That's probably my favorite question to consider. And it's one of the reasons I love this argument, because it tries to get as close as possible to an answer. And yes, I think it does have leeway to interpret what you think that answer is, but I would say the theist has a little bit of an upper hand here. And for them, good job. But what do you think? Am I crazy? Did I communicate the information in a biased way? Did I communicate something that was false? If so, let me know. And if you have a different proof for God that you think is better than the cosmological argument, let me know down in the comments. But this has been day 16 of the Hopeful Skeptic Coffee Chat. Cheers and have a great day.